Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining this morning. My name is Michaela, and I'm a program manager working for Microsoft, and I work on the gateways and VNet gateways. So today, a couple of things that we are going to go over. So we're going to first talk about the on-premises data gateways, and I'm going to first tell you a bit more about just some features that we just released and some of them that are about to release in a couple of weeks. Then we're going to talk more about best practices, how you can work with the gateways the best way. A bit on like the roadmap, what are we going to build in the next 6 months. And then after that, we're going to do the same thing for VNet gateways. And at the end, there's probably enough time for any questions that you have. OK, so the on-premise data gateway, I hope you're all familiar already with the gateway. But basically, what it is that it helps you to connect to data that is in your on-premise environment or behind a VNet as well. And with the gateway, you can get your data into the cloud. And the gateway is used by different applications. You can use the same one for different applications like Power BI, Power Apps, Logic Apps, Azure Search as well. So now let's go into the more fun stuff about new features that we are about to release. So the first one is the new security rules, which it's on the way. It should be a couple of weeks before it gets to production. But with the new security rules, so this is the current model how things are working in Power BI. Is that you have the gateway security roles, which is only the admin role. And the admin is able to manage the gateway, of course, update things, install it, etc. But it's also the only person that is allowed to create data sources on the gateway. And then, of course, manage users who can also use the data sources or the gateway. And then we have the data source rules. So once you create a data source on the gateway, you automatically become the owner of the data source, which allows you to manage the data source, update credentials, things like that. You can use, of course, the data source in your reports and also share that data source with other users so they are able to use the data source in their reports as well. So what we heard from a lot of customers, we got a lot of feedback around that the admin role was really a bottleneck for creating data sources because most organizations don't want to grant everyone access to be an admin just for the sake of creating data sources. So what we're going to do is we're going to create 3 new roles. And these roles are similar to the current roles that already exist in Power Apps today. But we're going to rename those as well. So for the gateway, there's going to be 2 extra roles that are called connection creator with sharing and connection creator, where what we currently call a data source in Power BI, in Power Apps, it's called connection. And where we're trying to get more into the connection, because that is really what it is, right? You're connecting to your data source. So that's why we're calling it connection creator. And the connection creator with sharing is now a person that doesn't have the admin capability. So they're not allowed to update gateways, things like that. But they are allowed to create connections on the gateway. And they're also able to share that role with others. So they can only share, of course, the connection creator role, not admin role. And the connection creator is just like a user that can create connections on the gateway. And all of these 3 gateway roles, once they create data sources or connections, they become the owner of that data source/connection. And now that person is in charge of credentials, etc., and they can share that connection with other users, and they can even like reshare it based on their roles. So hopefully, with this new security model, that will solve a lot of the current issues that a lot of organizations were facing. The next big thing that we're currently working on is gateway diagnostics, and I really think that this is the most requested feature questions we always get from customers. So I'm really excited that we are working on this. So the general idea of gateway diagnostics is that we take the current logs that you get on your gateway service today, but now we upload them to like a central managed location by us, and we show you all the metrics through the Power Platform Admin Center or through the Power BI Managed Gateway portal. So in that way, you get all your metrics and logs all in the same place, and instead of having them just by gateway, we group them by cluster, so you immediately get everything for your cluster. Two things that we're going to do with that data. We're going to provide you a way to get to that data directly from Power BI, so you can build your own templates and connect to the data so you can do your own thing. But what we also want to do is provide you out-of-the-box visualizations directly in the portal, so that you can directly get insights on it. You don't need to get started up as well. So we're going to do this in phases. The gateway diagnostics first part, we'll go into private preview first. That will happen this month as well. And then from there, we keep on iterating, and the public preview will probably come in a couple of months. And the next thing that we are also about to release next month is the improved data source management. And so what we're going to do, this is the current gateway management page that we have in the Power Platform Admin Center. And we're going to replace what we have in the Managed Gateways page in Power BI with this page. So that means that both places are exactly the same, and you can just manage your data sources, gateways, VNets as well from the same place. And this is also the portal that will get the new security rules in it as well. Yeah, so that's basically that. Then I want to continue to gateway best practices and just walk you through some of the common things that we get questions about a lot. We also release some documentation around this as well. I will link. I have a link to that at the end of the slide, so you can just reread it. And yeah. So before we start, I just wanted to retell a bit more about like the gateway definitions, because I think there sometimes can be a bit confusing. So when we talk about the gateway, we actually talk about the application that you install. And that, of course, that application you install on a server, a personal machine, wherever you want it. And together, the gateway with the server becomes a member. And if you've already been working with the gateway, you probably know that you can add members to a gateway cluster. And that means that you can just like keep adding gateways to the same cluster that are like running on different machines. But even if you have just one gateway connecting to, you just have one gateway, it's still like part of a cluster, but it's just a cluster with one gateway in it. Okay, then let's go into some of the best practices. So some of them are going to be very easy and straightforward, but it actually happens quite a lot. And the first one is to know all your gateway recovery keys. You need them if you want to migrate. And we do see, unfortunately, a lot of requests coming in where people have lost their recovery keys, and there's nothing we can do about it. So please store that somewhere safe, and also somewhere where you can find them as well. The next one is around the development workloads and business critical workloads. So what we always recommend is to have at least 2 gateway clusters running, one that you will use just for development purposes, and one that is, and one that is for your business critical workloads. So whenever you need to update your gateway or want to add new data sources to your machine, or maybe add an extra report to the machine, you can just first test it out on your development cluster before you start doing it on your production cluster, which I think is pretty straightforward, but we definitely recommend just doing that. Even though maybe sometimes your gateways are still small, you're like getting started, it's really good to have them both, just to protect like everything that's already in production. And the next thing is to use multiple gateway clusters. So we see a lot of organizations that are putting all their reports, all their users into this one giant cluster, and they just start adding a lot of members to that cluster. And this can easily result in performance issues for both just too many people that are like sending queries to your gateway, causing either memory or CPU to like spike up, but also people that are like testing on the same cluster as like, while on the same cluster also, I don't know, some business critical reports are running and they get performance issues just because other people are doing maybe something stupid with the gateway. And so we always kind of recommend to split things out into whatever makes sense for your organization. So that could either be by business departments, you can separate out different reports or different data sources, just depending on how your organization works. But it's definitely a good idea to do that, unless you're, of course, a very small organization. Then it's probably not. And I also want to say that it's even if, for example, you see that you have a lot of users using your gateway, but still the load on your gateway is pretty low, it's still good to separate it out. We have seen with the gateway is that, I don't have an exact number, but somewhere when you start to get a lot of users getting using the same gateway, we get into performance issues. And this is only happening when there's like thousands of users using the same gateway, but this can happen. So definitely good idea to spread them out. Then the next one, I hope everyone is already doing it, but we have high availability and load balancing features for the gateway. It's always recommended to use them. So both of these features work when you have more than one gateway to your cluster. So the high availability is that if I send a query to my gateway, and that gateway is either busy or it is down, the query can fall over to a different cluster as well. And this also helps you when you need to, for example, update gateways. You can get them offline, and another gateway can keep on running and like get all your queries. Same thing for load balancing. So you can use load balancing to get more performance for the queries that get sent to the gateway. Then the next big thing is always like how to plan and maintain cluster scalability. Because normally when you start out, you just have maybe one cluster running, everything is running good, but at some point, people are starting to like use more data, get more queries to the gateway, and you probably are gonna see performance issues at some point. So I just want to give some tips on how you can deal with those. And the first thing is always that it's important to understand how your people are going to interact with the gateway, because this is gonna determine what type of machine you probably need to have and how you can either like scale up or scale out your gateway. So the load on your gateway is kind of determined by the type of queries that you're running, but it's not like 100% true, because it also depends on the data source you're using, the type of queries that you're sending, so it's not one or the other. But normally you have that imports, so if you're using a lot of like imports, it's more memory intense on the gateway because we need to like process mostly a lot of data at the same time, so that's mostly memory intense, while direct query and live are mostly sending well, small queries, but a lot of small queries at the same time, so that's mostly more like CPU intense. So when to scale up or scale out, that's always a difficult question, and I already talked about the gateway diagnostics. We do have the report already available in our documentation that you can download, and we have a template that helps you monitor everything that is happening on your gateway, so you can monitor your CPU consumption, memory consumption, the types of queries that get sent to your gateway. But at some point, you need to scale up or out. And we get a lot of questions from a lot of organizations at some point where we just simply see that their gateway is very CPU usage or is reached the memory threshold. And the first thing that they want to do is just like start tweaking everything. There's a lot of things you can configure in the gateway. There's also a lot of things that you can do with making your queries maybe a bit more performance. But I do want to say there is a limit to it, and there's also really a limit to how far we can tweak that. And it's mostly just a good idea to get an extra machine. So then we get into the question of when to scale up or scale out. I think in 95% of the cases, it should be scale out just by adding a new member to the gateway. Just because scaling up is, of course, making your machine bigger. So you can make your machine bigger by adding more cores or more memory to the same machine. And this can really help if you, for example, have a data set that has a certain amount of memory that it is using, and the data set is simply too big to run on the machine. But what we have seen with scaling out is that in most of the cases, it gives better performance if it's just about having more queries or more load getting to the gateway. Because even if you scale up to a certain level, at some point we cannot utilize the machine completely or not as efficient anymore. So 95% of the cases, I would say it's better to scale out, which just means adding a new cluster to your a new member to your cluster. It is always also recommended. I didn't have it in the slides, but to have to have members on the cluster that are similar in CPU and memory size, so you don't get, if you have one large data set that can only run on like one of the specific members. And then I think the next thing I already talked about it a bit is I'm skipping one. I'm sorry. So then the other thing one thing that you can also do is to get better performance is to just start a completely new cluster. So if you know there is a team that is really experimental, or you have a team with business critical reports, or you just simply, the team has grown so much that it's maybe better to just add a new cluster and start fresh on that one for certain purposes, instead of like just keep on adding things to the same cluster. And the last thing, very important, is of course the monitoring and troubleshooting of the gateway performance. So currently we only have the template file that you can download from the documentation, but it's definitely recommended to use that and to just monitor how's your CPU memory going, uptime. There's so much information in there. And we're working on the diagnostics feature to make things much more easier for you, because we do recognize that it can be a bit painful sometimes. So all this, what I just talked about, we wrote a documentation about it as well. So you can just look it up and reference to it if you need to. Then a bit of the roadmap for gateways. So what we're going to do in the next 6 months. So we're going to improve the diagnostics and troubleshooting. That's our #1 priority to make that much easier for you. That also includes better error messaging. So when gateway fails, it can sometimes be very difficult to understand where the error is coming from. Is it the gateway? Is it your data source? So we're putting a lot of effort into improving that. Then the next thing that we want to do is also make sharing of cloud data sources possible. Because right now you can only use the gateway and share it and have all the security rules on that. We want to bring all that good also to the cloud data sources as well. And then we have just a lot of things that we want to do around better documentation. And this is also really about the best practices I talked about and the diagnostics, because we do see that is the most questions we get from. So by just providing better documentation, we hope we can answer more of your questions. So let's switch to the VNet Data Gateway. So VNet Data Gateway is a gateway application, but instead of just running on your on-prem services where you need to have your own machine, we inject it in a subnet of your VNet, so we can reach your data sources that are behind a VNet, and this service is managed, so you don't need to manage the actual infrastructure for running the gateway. So currently today, the VNet gateways are available for Power BI data sets and for the Power Platform data flows. So unfortunately, not yet for the Power BI data flows. And of course, we have a vision to support everything with the VNet gateways. Then some supported data sources that we have right now. You can see the list. I'm not going to name them all. There might be that there are some other data sources that work as well that we haven't covered with testing. So you definitely are free to test more data sources to see if things are working. The VNets are, of course, still in public preview as well. There's some exciting new things that are coming for the VNet gateways. So the one thing I'm really excited about is the high availability and load balancing for the VNet gateways, which allows you to create a cluster of VNet gateways in the same subnet. So you can then have up to 3 gateways in the same cluster of VNet gateways that are running. And we're also going to let you to specify the idle time. So right now, if a VNet gateway is inactive for 30 minutes, we shut down the gateway. And once you're start sending a query to the VNet gateway again, I think we need around 2 minutes or so to get the VNet gateway up and running again before we can execute your query. If you need longer time than 30 minutes, you can just readjust the settings. So we have your gateway longer running in idle time. We do this up to 24 hours maximum, so it's not always on yet. Then the next one is troubleshooting. I apologize for this terrible image. It was just paint I've been using to demonstrate what we're doing. It's going to look much nicer when it's in the product. But the idea is to help you with network troubleshooting. When you're installing your gateway, you might get some error messages. So if you fill in information, we provide you with all the details, all the networking details of your VNet gateway. So it will be much easier for you to troubleshoot. Or if you need to create a support case, it will also be much easier for you to provide the information. Then some of the roadmap for VNet gateways. I think most of you are wondering when are they're going GA, a valid question. But there are some things that we need to do to actually make VNets good enough to make GA. So I don't have a date for the GA yet. But some things that we definitely need to add is just make sure that the more data sources are supported. We also need to make sure that the security rules for the gateways also work for VNets, that there is some form of diagnostics so you can start monitoring your VNets as well before we can make a GA. So that's something that we will work on in the upcoming months. And so that's basically all I had for today. And I think we have a lot of time left for questions. So yeah, if there are any questions, let me know. Yes. Oh, good question. So there was a question about VNet gateways pricing. And so currently VNet gateways are free to use because we are in public preview. Once we go GA, there will of course be pricing for the VNet gateways. We don't have the exact model yet, but probably how it will work is that the VNet gateways are using CPU, so we will work together with Power BI to have that CPU be accounted for in your entire CPU consumption that you have in Power BI. So if you want to use load balancing or high availability, you need to have more than one VNet in a cluster or one gateway in a cluster to actually make that happen. But you can always use just one gateway if you want to. Yes? So it's VNet injection. We're exploring the possibility to get something like that working. Yes?
My question is regarding the VNet gateway. So at the moment, we are using this gateway at one of a kind. And the Power BI works just fine. And the Power App, actually, we are trying to build some data flow like with the Power App. And we're using SQL connector.
Mm-hmm.
But the SQL connector does work only with the VNet application when we go via Windows authentication or SQL Server authentication. But when we are trying to implement AD application, explicit authentication, it's not giving any option to select the gateway over there. Is it implied, is not supported, what is that question?
I want to repeat the question, but it's difficult because there's a lot of explanation there. I think the best thing that we can do is just chat offline so I can better understand your scenario before I answer the question. We can just chat after this is over. Oh, yes.
Do you want to just read this out? Because then you can
Just read off the screen, it's going to be easier.
So the question is, are you able to cover anything on self-hosted integration runtime, gateway, roadmap, or is that another product team? So the self-hosted integration runtime is the gateway equivalent that is used by Azure Data Factory. So I don't have a roadmap update for that because Azure Data Factory is using their own set of connectors to get data into the cloud as well. So they have their own runtime that works with their products and do the copy activities, while the data gateway will use Power Query connectors and the M code to do that. So different products, different roadmap. Yes? So the question is with the new diagnostic feature, you can put that into your own log analytics. So yes, in theory, yes. So we provide a way for you to export the logs from the admin portal. So in that way, you can just set up your own flows then again to get that data into the log analytics. We're also working with Power BI to see if we can be part of their general log analytics story. Any other questions? Yes?
I have a question. For the security roles, you talked a lot about individual users. Is it also going to cover AD groups?
So the question is that the security roles will also cover AD groups. And yes, it will allow you for email-enabled groups to use it, and non-emailed as well, yeah. Yes. Any other questions? Online? No? OK, I think we ended a bit early, but it's OK. Thank you, everyone, for joining. And if you have any other questions, you can just come up to me. Happy to answer or help any that you have. So thank you.